in Masechet Shevuot is Lamed Aleph 31. We did not finish because I held off actually 5 lines or so from the bottom on Lamed Amud Bet. 5 lines from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanan says the Braita. How do you know? Minayin l'dayan shlo yases sanigorin l'dvarav. How do you know that a dayan shouldn't do a sanigorin? Now, what's a sanigorin? So Rashi explains it's a sort of a situation where a dayan comes down on a ruling and he says, so and so is guilty or so and so is innocent, and then he doesn't feel good about it. He's, feels like either the data is not complete or people are questioning it. So he then looks for more evidence to support his position. That's what Sunny Gorin would be, like a secondary kind of, support for what I found. Says Rashi, that's inappropriate because you're only looking for one side, right? Once you've already poskined one way, you're not looking at all the evidence with an open mind to take it wherever it takes you. You've already sort of convinced yourself where it's going to be, and so you shouldn't keep doing sort of research in that vein. So you shouldn't do that. How do you know that? Talmud Lomar from the pasuk that says midvar sheker tirchak, that keep yourself very far away from sheker. So even this thing where you think you're doing it honestly, be careful not to be corrupted. Minayin, 4 lines in the bottom, the dayan shelo yeshev talmid bor lefanav. How do you know that the dayan shouldn't have a student who is not knowledgeable and is going to give bad information in front of him? Talmud Lomar midvar sheker tirchak. Midvar sheker in this case means the person. If a person's not going to be honest or be able to think clearly, stay away from that person. Don't let them corrupt you. Minayin the dayan sheyodeh lechavro shu gazlan chen aid sheyodeh bechavro shu gazlan minayin shelo yitztaref imo. Let's say, you see something, or you're a dayan, or you're an aide, you're a witness, you see an event, but you know that the person who saw it with you is an inappropriate person. He's a gazlan. So you could say, that's not my problem, it's his problem, right? Let me go to court and do my thing and let the court figure it out themselves. That's not correct. Talmud Lomar, midvar sheker tirchak. That's why it says stay away from someone who tells sheker, meaning from someone who's a gazlan. Minayin the dayan sheyodeh b'din shu merumeh shel yomar. Let's say a dayan is part of a din that's merumeh. Merumeh means that he sits in court and he hears the witnesses say we saw this happen, and they check out on every feature, but he's very, very confident that they are lying or that something is sketchy here, right? That's what merumeh means, literally sketchy, right? How do you know shel yomar? You shouldn't say, look, edim, right? The edim are the ones who are saying it. It's not me who's making it up. I'm the judge, right? So let me achatchenu. I will sort of wait it out. V'yehei kolar, turn to the top of Daf Lamed Aleph and Aleph. Kolar toloi b'tzavar edim. The responsibility, the kolar, the burden of the sin will be on the edim. They're the ones who are lying. I'm just going through the motions of being the judge. Talmud Lamar that he should not let that happen. He should keep working to uproot any kind of falsehood. Continues. We're now 4 lines to the top of Lamed Aleph and Aleph. Minayin l'talmid sheyoshev l'fnei rabo. Let's say a talmid is sitting in front of his rebbe. He's a student. He's not really the one who's supposed to be speaking. And ro'ez chut la'ani v'chov la'ashir. He sees something that acquits or gives money to the poor person who no one really wants to be in their good favor, or chayiv to the ashir, which of course, is going to lead to sort of bad repercussions for him potentially, because people are going to say this guy is a troublemaker. How do you know that you should not be quiet and say, let someone else raise the concern? I don't need to get my head involved in this. If you know something is going on that is false, you have to stay very far away from it and speak your mind, speak your truth, even to power. How do you know a Talmud sees that their teacher is making a mistake? They can tell that he's following an incorrect way of thinking, right? In this case, or maybe he doesn't have the right evidence and he's emphasizing the wrong thing. You shouldn't say, and we've all done this, I think, look, I'll wait till he comes to his conclusion, meaning he'll make whatever conclusion of the din, and then I will beautifully explain the facts that he missed and what's wrong, and explain how I got a better conclusion. Vastarenu, right? I will then contradict him or pull apart his arguments. V'avnenu mishalin, I will tell them what I think, right? K'dei sheyikra hadin al shmi. Then, of course, I get all the credit. So this is you let them go down their path and make mistakes, and I will fix it up for them so that I get credit. Talmud Lomar midvar sheker tirchak, that you should stay as far away from sheker as you can. And if you see something going off the rails, you should stop it at that point. You shouldn't wait with this kind of calculation. We are 10 lines down from Lamed Aleph and Aleph. Minayin l'talmid shamar lo rabo let's say, this is a very interesting case. Let's say a student, his teacher, and again, the student teacher is not relevant in this case necessarily. It's just someone you trust very significantly. So you have a student, his teacher comes to him and says, I'm totally trustworthy, right? You've known me for many years. Yodea ata bi. You know about me, says the teacher. Shem notznim li mea mana eni mivadeh, right? If they gave me $100,000, I wouldn't lie. I'm completely above board. When it starts this way, you're in trouble, right? Even if they gave me 100 mana, I would not lie. But I have a little problem, says the teacher. Mana yeshli etzel ploni. I lent a mana, right? A mana, say $1,000 or $100, whatever number, to so and so. They only and unfortunately for me, I had two witnesses. One of them died, or I only had one witness for whatever reason. I only have one witness, and I'm afraid that if I go to him and say, you owe me $100, and he tries to deny it, and I bring my one witness, he'll deny it again, and then I have no recourse. So do me a favor. Can you, how do you know that even if your teacher says, come, you'll be the second witness? I know you weren't there, but I'm totally good for this. How do you shouldn't combine with him? That's what it means when it says midvar sheker tirchak. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? That's not tirchak midvar sheker, that's don't lie, right? I'm midvar sheker tirchak. Nafka havada shkurika mishaker. That's that person is making it up for Achmana Amar Lo Taneh B'Recha Eit Shaker. So that you don't need midvar sheker tirchak to tell you that you shouldn't get in on this scheme, right? This scheme is clearly a lie. It's a false testimony. Ella, no, it's a little bit more subtle the case. Could go on the second to last narrow line. Damar lay, where the Rebbe, the teacher, says to you, look, you trust me, right? You trust that this guy really owes me the $100 or whatever. I only have one witness, but you know what? I'm not asking you to lie for me. I just want you to come to the court case. Because what's the case? I know for sure I have one witness, right? You never know, of course, in these cases, who else might have seen it. So I don't know. And the other guy, the guy who I lent money to, doesn't know if another witness was there. So they just don't know. But we know there's one guy. So what I want you to do is you come when I go to the court, kum hatam, and you just stand there, v'lotema v'lomidi. You don't have to say anything. Right? Nothing, you're not saying anything false, but by you standing there, the guy's going to look at the accused, let's say the one who borrowed the money, he's going to say, oh, this guy's a witness and this guy's accusing me, and I see there's another one standing behind. Let me just get it over with and I'll admit and I'll pay, or whatever. Right? So I'm hoping, says the Rebbe in this case, to essentially intimidate him and lead him to think that you're a witness. Don't say anything. Says even that is obviously, not obviously, but even that, afilo hachi asur, that is prohibited, mishum shenemar, and that's based on the pasuk of midvar sheker tirchak, that you have to stay very far away from even giving the appearance of something that is sheker. Continues the Gemara, minayin, where am I? Second wide line, the noshe b'chavero mana. Right now, this, of course, we had these cases before, but these were very frequent issues. Person lends someone else $100, let's say, right, a mana. Remember that if you go to that person and say, you owe me $100, he'll probably pay you back in this case. If you go to him and say, you owe me $200, then he's modeh b'miksat, let's say. He says, I only owe you 100. He has to swear that he owes you 100, and he could just give you 100, right? Says the Gemara, how do you know that if you lend 100 to someone else, you shouldn't say to yourself or say to your attorney, listen, I'm going to argue that he owes me 200, even though I know it's false. Why? So that he will then, I'm trusting him more than I trust myself, right? He'll admit that he owes me 100, and then he'll have to come make a shvuah. Now, once he's making a shvuah, remember we have a concept which we're going to actually go through more in this Masechet called Gilgul shvuah, right? There's certain things you can't be mechayev a shvuah on, like karka, right? If I have a dispute about a land, you can't be mechayev a shvuah even if you're modeh b'miksat, but you can do a Gilgul shvuah on karka. The Gilgul means a secondary or a adjunct almost. So if you're already making a shvuah about one thing, I could say, oh, and by the way, I'd like you to also make a shvuah about this dispute that we have. So basically, I'm going to manufacture a shvuah. Right? I will yitchayev li shvuah v'agalgel alav shvuah mimakom acher. I will roll in another shvuah from another issue. Talmud Amar midvar sheker tirchak. That's obviously something. You're not actually looking to collect more money from him, but you are lying in order to manipulate the din. Next case, 4 lines from the wide lines. Minayin lenoshe b'chavero mana. Let's say you owe someone $100, right? You borrowed money. And he comes and plays this trick on you. He comes, he says, "Oh, where's the $200 I lent you?" V'tanu matayim. He says, "I want the 200." So you're now stuck, right? Because you maybe you don't want to swear, or maybe you're afraid if you go swear in court, you're going to have to bring another shvuah. So how do you know minayin? Sorry, shelo yomar, that you shouldn't say achaprenu bebeitin. Look, I will deny in Beit Din that I owe him anything, and then I don't have to make a shvuah. Odelo chutz the Beit Din, and when we leave court, I'll say, "Oh, by the way, I owe you 100. Here's the 100." Right? Kedei shlo chayev lo shvuah legagel la shvuah makam acher. So I don't have to make a shvuah, and therefore I won't pull a shvuah to me for somewhere else. Obviously the question that everyone asks, Tosfos points out here, is, what do you mean? You're saying I'm going to lie so that because if I told the truth, he'd make me make another shvuah. Why don't you just lie about the other shvuah, right? You seem to be a good liar at this. So Tosfos, of course, points out that people rationalize all these things, right? This guy says, I'm lying, but I know that I'm going to pay him. I have the money set aside. I'm just doing it to protect myself. I'm not actually going to deny something that's true. I'm just sort of, not going along with the game. But how do you know that you shouldn't do that? That you should, that's midvar sheker tirchak, which also seems like it's really lying, but we call it dvar sheker. How do you know? You guys can hear me, right? I'm good. How do you know that if you have three people who lend money to, where am I? Three people lend money to one person, right? So, they lend him money together, let's say, and it's a joint thing. They shouldn't say, right? They shouldn't say, listen, I'm going to take my name off the contract, one of them, so that I'm no longer a plaintiff here. I will turn out to be the Baldin, right? Or two of them will be the Baldin. One will be the Baldin, two will be the Eidim, because they all saw it happen. So we can get the 100 from him and split it up. So basically, let's say he owes each one, 33. One will come and say, you owe me 100. The other two will be the witnesses, and then they'll split it, right? So at the end of the day, they're actually telling the truth. They're getting the money they deserve, but they're doing it through false pretenses. Talmud Lomar, you shouldn't do that from the pasuk of midvar sheker tirchak. Okay, next case, and this is getting back closer to our Mishnah. Minayin l'shnayim shabo l'din. Two people come to court. Echad lavush smartutin. One is wearing smartutin, which are like, rags and ripped clothing and shmatas. V'echad lavush itztalit bat mea mana. The other is wearing a gorgeous suit. That's itztalit. We often translate it as what's it called? Silk, but I don't think it really means that. But a very, very fancy talit worth 100 mana, which is terribly large value. So they say to the rich guy, Levush kimoto, listen, you have to dress similarly. You can't, it's not fair, it's not appropriate, which is really a whole nother level of being fair, that you look good and he doesn't. You have to either dress the way he's dressed, go get your clothes like his, or he'll be shul kimotkar, buy him a suit like yours. Talmud Lomar, how do you know that's the case? Because it says once when this happened in front of Rav and Baravuna, right, people would come in front of him and they, obviously look differently. He would say to them, Shlufu puzmukaicho v'chutu ladina. Take off your puzmukaicho, which are some very fancy Italian leather shoes, right? I don't know about Italian leather, but very fancy shoes, and sit down for din. Meaning, take off your ties and your this and your that. Everyone's got to look the same in court, just so that no one's intimidated and that people feel like they're getting a fair shake. Okay, continues the Gemara Minayin. We are again around halfway down. There's a star because it's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Says the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Minayin l'dayin shel yishma divrei baldin kodem sheyavo baldin chavero. How do you know? We talked about this yesterday, that a dayan shouldn't listen to arguments from one side before the other side came, not judge on them, but not even hear them. Talmud Lomar midvar sheker tirchak, that you really have to do it when everyone's there together. Minayin lebaldin shel yatim dvarav. The same thing would be true, not necessarily in front of a court, but how do you know that the Baldin can't taste, meaning test his sort of arguments on the dayan before the other one comes and say, what do you think about this? What's, etc. Questions like that. And Rav Kahana said, I learned at Matni from the Psukim. It says in Lotisa, Shem Hashem Lekach L'Shav, sorry, Lotisa, it says Lotisa by Dvar Sheker, right? You shouldn't accept things. What it means is lo tisa, which means you shouldn't accept, right? So you shouldn't listen to something that's false and be the judge in such a case. But I read it also lo tasi, you shouldn't be the one who gives it. You shouldn't be the one who causes it to be false, meaning don't say. So the Baldin and the Dayan both cannot be participant in making someone have the advantage in a din. Now, on similar idea, and this is a pasuk that has nothing to do with what we've been discussing, but there is a whole parak in Yecheskel. Yecheskel talks about people. It's a beautiful, beautiful parak actually, where Yecheskel talks about justice. People. We had this Gemara before. I'm trying to remember where we had it. We had the Gemara talking about this parak. It'll come to me, I think. But remember, the whole parak in Yecheskel is where someone is good, and then his child is bad, and then his grandchild is good again, and all the good goes away, and all the bad goes away, and it's a whole about how life is unfair, and people don't behave fairly and behave appropriately. And one of the things we state is Asher lo tov aseh b'toch amav. The child will not do good among the people. What does that mean? Rav says what that's referring to is harsha'a. That's a person who comes with a harsha'a. Harsha'a is like a third-party claim, right? Where Reuven lent money to Shimon and then sells that contract basically to Levi. So Levi shows up to collect the money, but that's frowned upon. The reason Rashi says it's frowned upon is that, if you have the parties there, Reuven and Shimon, they can sometimes negotiate, come to an agreement. There's much more flexibility. But when you're a hedge fund that bought that out, right, there's a lot less flexibility. And so we discourage that kind of behavior. Of course, if there's no alternative, Tosas here points out, if there's no other way to get your money, you're fair. You can do that to get your money. But we discourage doing something like that. And Shmuel says, this actually refers to a person who buys a field in which there's a lot of dispute about who owns it. And so basically that person is getting involved into a thing that they know is going to be a machloket, and you shouldn't really insert yourself into that situation if you can avoid it. So
these are like big deals in the contemporary economy.
They're very big deals. I'm trying, it's not a politically motivated, but and again, Tosas does give that backup that basically, if there's no other way to do it, it's not like you can't do it. It's just that it's frowned upon because these things, as are they're much less personal. There's less room for compromise. There's less room for clarity. Obviously I think today, many things are no longer personal on that level anyway. So the whole sort of discussion is a little different, but I think the motive, the spirit is obviously still the case, right? Stay out of things that are very disputed. Anyways, back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah continued by saying that the mitzvah of Shevuot it only applies to people who are ra'oi to give testimony. Doesn't matter. You already listed those people. Lafuki mai. Who are you excluding now? Lafuki melech. To exclude a king. Right, a king is not allowed to give testimony because we learned in Sanhedrin that a king, melech lo dan v'lo daninoto. That's the more important point, right? He can't say testimony. And so if he lies and swears that he doesn't know testimony, he's patur because he couldn't have said it anyways. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, it's including someone who plays with dice. If you recall, we had this as one of the people who are pasul for edut midrabanan. So this person is only pasul midrabanan, but nonetheless, he can't do it. And since he can't do it, his shvuah midoraita doesn't have an effect. Manda Amar Misachik B'Kuvya. Now the one who said that, Koshke Melech, who's Aser Midoraita. Manda Amar Melech, he would say, Ava Misachik B'Kuvya, Midoraita Michsachasi. The truth is that Minator, he can actually say testimony. Rabbanan Hu de Paslu. It's only the Rabbanan who said he's pasul, and so potentially he could say testimony. If he did, it might work Min HaTorah. Let's say, and remember that we had halachot, why that would matter. Let's say someone pulled two people are disputing an item, and whoever owns it, whoever's holding it gets it until you resolve that. But if you have testimony midoraita that goes to the other one and the person grabs it away, maybe that person can keep it. So therefore, his testimony would have an impact and he might be chayav for his shvuah according to that opinion. Continues the Gemara, b'fnei beitin shelo b'fnei beitin. Remember, Rabbi Meir said that you're chayav a shvuah etrat edut on your own, whether you do it in front of Beit Din or not in front of Beit Din, and only in front of Beit Din if you do it through the Beit Din, or through the other person. They say, Mashbiacha ani, we want you to swear. And the Chachamim said the whole thing only applies in front of Beit Din, right? Now that's, of course, based on the Psukim. The Psukim, if you recall, in Vayikra, talk about when you go to court and you do this. So the Psukim only talk about court, right? So it says, we are 7 lines from the bottom. So Amru Kaman Rabbanan Kameder of Papa. The Rabbanan said in front of Rav Papa, they're arguing about don mina umina. If you learn something from another source, do you stay with the halachot of that other source, or don minav uki batra? Or is it where you go, you learn something from a source, and then you apply the rules of that thing kamiflagi? Remember here, the interesting case is that we don't really talk about Shevuot Edut, about a person saying Shevuot Edut. We only talk about a third party doing Shevuot Edut, but we learn that a person who does Shevuot Edut on their own is chayav from pikadon. From the fact that if you lie, remember the Torah does talk about Shevuot Pikadon, where someone says, you have my thing, and I say, I don't have it, right? Then we say that you have to pay, or you have to swear, depending on, so you have to swear. If you swear, you have to bring a karban. Sorry, that's halacha. So we learn Shvata Pikadon, it says an individual can't do it. Shvata Edut, it just says you can't do it if the court tells you not, asks you a question. How do we know that an individual is chayav for Shvata Edut? We learn it from Shvata Pikadon. Now, the question is, how similar is it to Shvata Pikadon? Once we learned it from that, do we say, oh, well, but go back and learn all the halachot of Shvata Edut from what we know about Shvata Edut, which is that it's only in front of court? Or similar to Shvata Pikadon, which could be anywhere, right, wherever the guy says, you have my thing, you should be chayav for that kind of Shvata Edut, like Shvata Pikadon. So let's read that all inside. Rameir Savar, Rameir holds domina mina mi pikadon. We learn out and we compare it to pikadon. Ma pikadon, just like by a object, pikadon means something you're supposed to be watching. Mushva mi piatzmo chayav. If you swear that you don't have it, you're chayav, that's based on the pasuk. Af edut mushva mi piatzmo chayav. That's how we know by edut, which doesn't say it in the Torah. That's how we know that if you swear on your own, you're chayav. Umina, but let's compare it to pikadon. Not pikadon, bein bebeitin or bein shalom bebeitin, you'd be chayav. Afedut, bein bebeitin, bein shalom bebeitin, you'd be chayav. So therefore, it is the same as pikadon in that halacha. And the Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan are of the opinion that the way we learn things in this vein, 3 lines from the bottom, is that domina uki ba'atra. You learn the halacha from pikadon, but then all the details of Shevuot Edut of an individual are learned from Shevuot Edut of a person making you do it, of Beitin. So ma pikadon mushba mi piatzmo chayav. So we learn Shevuot Edut from pikadon, that if you swear on your own, you're chayav af edut mushba mi piatzmo chayav. But then you stop learning from pikadon and you go back to Shevuot Edut v'uki batra ma mushba mi pi achirim bebeitin in shlo bebeitin lo. Just like the other aspect of Shevuot Edut, where other people say, do you swear? It's only in front of Beit Din. We're going to learn that more in a minute, but it's based on the pasuk. It's only in front of Beit Din, not in front of Beit Din. Af mushba mipi atzmo, Beit Din in, shlo Beit Din lo. So too, the halacha of someone who makes a Shevuot Edut from themselves is only in front of Beit Din, not in front of Beit Din, and that is the Rabbanan in the Mishnah. So that is the first explanation, beautiful explanation of the machloket. Says, turn the page to top of Daf Lamed Aleph on the bet. Amar le Rav Papa said back to him, I disagree with this. Imi pikadon gamri la Rabbanan. If the Rabbanan learned out Shevuot Edut from pikadon, kuli ama lo pligi de domina mina. They would have learned everything from pikadon, and they would have agreed with Rabbi Meir that even if you do it shelo b'fnei beit din, you're chayav. Ella, the reason the Rabbanan disagree is not because of domina v'uki batra. Hayna time in the Rabbanan, the might they become the chomer, because their source to say that an individual who says a Shevuot Edut on their own without being prompted by the court is chayav is actually from a kal v'chomer. And what's the kal v'chomer? Ma mipi achirim chayav mipi atzmo l'kol shekain. If you're chayav from somebody else doing it to you, someone says to you, "Do you swear?" and you say yes, you're chayav. Then if you just volunteered on your own, you're for sure chayav. But of course, once you learn out from a kal v'chomer, says the Gemara, "Mitamayti they be kal v'chomer." If the source is a kal v'chomer, then you're stuck, because we have a very, very strong principle of dayo lavo minadin liot knidon. You can only learn out what the thing you're learning it from, right? So you can't learn more about this halacha than from the existing halacha that you're learning it from. Ma mushma mi pi achirim. Just like if others cause you to swear, it's only bebeitin in, shalom bebeitin lo. Af mishvam piatzmo, therefore, according to the Chachamim, is mipi b'fnei beitin in, shalom b'fnei beitin lo. So that was the Rav Papa's response to the Rabbanan. Okay, say the Rabbanan back to Rav Papa. So whole dialogue. Amr relay Rabbanan, Rav Papa said the Rabbanan back to Rav Papa. How could you be right? Mimatzin amr telav b'dom mina umina pligi. Can you really say that they don't argue about don mina umina? Right. Again, this is Rav Papa's explanation is that everybody agrees don mina umina, that the Chachamim would not say uki batra, that you go after its own thing. So if you learned it from pikadon, you'd have to stick with pikadon's halachot. It's just that they don't learn it from pikadon. Say the Rabbanan to Rav Papa, can you really say he doesn't learn it from pikadon? Hatznan gabi pikadon. We learned by Pikadon the following. This is a Mishnah, right? We learned in the Mishnah we're going to have later when we get to Shevuot Pikadon, next parak. It says in the Mishnah, Shevuot Pikadon nohege b'anashim u'b'nashim, right? Which, because it makes sense, right? Everyone can watch things. You don't need to have any reason there. And b'rechokim b'kruvim, they can be relatives to you and distant from you. B'ksherin psulim, they can be kosher for edus or not. B'fnei beitin shlo b'fnei beitin, whether you're in front of court or not, mipi atzmo. But it continues the Mishnah later. If you learn it from, if you're mushpah from other people, you only are chayav if you do it in front of Beit Din, Divrei Rabbi Meir. And the Chachamim say, right, in this Mishnah later, bein mi piatzmo, bein mi piacherim, whether you do it, you start your shvuah or other people make you make the shvuah, kivan shekafar bo chayav. As soon as you admit it, you're chayav. Now says the Gemara, how did Rabbanan know that? Mushpa mi piacherim b'pikadon and all of the Rabbanan the chayav. Right, by pikadon, the Torah only talks about a case where you volunteer, I swear I don't have it. How do you know that you're also chayav if somebody else comes to you and says, do you have my thing? And I say, no. Will you swear? Do you swear that you don't have it? And you say, yes. How do you know that you're chayav in that case? It must be lav degamri le me edut, right? That's the case that we have by edut, right? So by edut it says one, by pikadon it says the other. From the fact that the chachamim have a halacha and they argue with Rabbi Meir later on, it must be that they learn one from the other. Shema mina, bidon mina pligi. You see from here that they in fact are learning out the halacha that a shvuat edut is chayav on your own from pikadon, and they're going to learn pikadon from shvuah. So you see that very clearly. So said Rav Papa, you're right. I'm completely wrong, said Rav Papa. Me'ahi, from that Mishnah yeah, you proved it. I'm just pointing out to you, Neha, from our Mishnah, Lekalamashmina, you couldn't have proven it. Because it was conceivable that in our Mishnah, the reason the Chachamim argued is because of a Kal V'chomer. But it does turn out that you are completely correct, right? That from the later Mishnah, and we'll get to the later Mishnah soon, or in a few days, that from the later Mishnah, it's clear that the Chachamim actually do compare Shevuot Edut to Shevuot Pikadon, and ultimately that's where they learn it out from. Okay, so that is that halacha. Continue the Mishnah, this was the final part of the Mishnah. Chayavin the final segment of the Mishnah. Chayavin al Zadon HaShvuah. You're chayav for making a shvuah on purpose. We said that, meaning you say, you know in your mind that you don't know anything, and you have edut, and you swear that you don't. Not immediately. How do we know that? Tana Rabbana, we had this brayta before, which is a very important ruling in the case of our Olevi Yored. B'kula nemar ben v'ne'elam. All the things in Olevi Yored, like Shvat, not Shvat, like Helamikdash and Tumah, right, what we started the Masechta with, it says the word ne'elam. You forgot that what you did, so what you were doing was not on purpose. But kan by Shevuot Edut lo nemar bava ne'elam. It doesn't say that. The chayiv al mezid kishogeg, to tell you that you're chayiv for mezid, like in the other cases where you're chayiv for shogeg. And continued the Mishnah. The next case was if you're shigagata, meaning you made a mistake about the shvuah, but you were zadona edut. You knew that you were lying about the testimony. He says, well, what's the case? It's where you said, Yodeya ani sheshvuah zu asura. I know, you said this quietly probably, but you said, I know that the shvuah is prohibited because I know testimony, but I don't know, or you say after the fact, I knew that it was prohibited. I didn't know that I was chayiv karban. So I knew that I knew testimony. I knew that I was lying and I was not allowed to lie about the shvuah, but I didn't know that my punishment was going to be the karban. So it was a shogeg on the karban, but as zadon on the edut, you also bring a karban in that case. But said that finally in the Mishnah, ein chayivin al shigagata gredata. You don't have to be chayiv. You're not chayiv on a karban if you make a shogeg completely, meaning you forget that you testimony, or you forget that you're not allowed to swear that testimony. You can't lie about testimony. You're putter on a karban. Says, well, this seems to go against Lema Tanina. This seems to support Rav Kahana and Rav Asi. Rav Kahana and Rav Asi had a machloket. This we had around a week ago. We had this Chavav, where Rav Kahana and Rav Asi had a machloket about if someone made a mistake, basically, about what they were saying, if you're chayav for making a shvuah in that case. Here it seems to imply that not seems to imply, sorry, it seems to support that a statement of Rav Kahana, of Rav Asi, that you're potter. So why would they have said that, right? Says more, well, that not necessarily, because look, it's not necessarily the case. Because Alpha Gav even though we learned in our Mishnah, we still need Rav Kahana Ravasi to make a statement about when you make a mistake, swearing about what you know. It's true. I would have thought that here specifically by Shevuot Edut, right here by Shevuot Edut, where it doesn't say v'ne'elam, b'inan shogeg dumi demezid. Avohatam, the case there where they were just talking about people were stating, I know something, I don't know something, I swear this is true, I swear this is not true. There, we would have thought it doesn't necessarily it doesn't leave out v'ne'elam, right? It does says v'ne'elam. Avohatam nichtiv v'ne'elam. I would have thought afilu shgagata kol dehu. Even if you forgot everything, meaning you forgot that what you're saying is false, you'd also be chayiv for that shvuah kamashma, and that's why they had to say earlier that you're not chayiv. And so that is in fact the way it is, that if you make a shvuah and you think at the time you make it that it's true, you're not chayiv a karban, or for over that shvuah, because you were completely honest with yourself at the time you made the shvuah. So that would be true both by a regular shvuah and by a shvuat ha'edut, like our Mishnah. Continues the Mishnah. What is this case? We're up to the Mishnah now on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Bet. What is this case of Shevuot Edut that we keep talking about, where someone else makes you make the Shevuah? Shevuot Edut Ketzad. Amar l'shnayim. Once a person says to two people, because obviously you need two witnesses, Ba'u v'hi iduni, come and say testimony for me. I know you saw something happen. You saw me lend money. Come tell the court. And they say Shevuah. She'ein anu yodim l'cha edut. That's mi piatzmo. We swear we don't know what testimony for you. Oh, shamrulo, or the baldin says to them, or they say to him, Ein anu yodim l'cha edut. We don't know testimony for them. And he says, are you really going to stick with that? Mashpia ani alechem. I will bring a shvuah on you to testify for me. And they say, amen. Yes, we swear that we don't know it. So that's mipi achirim. Hare elu chayavin. Of course, according to everyone, there has to be in Beit Din to be chayav in that second case. But they are chayav for Shevuot Edut if it turns out later that they were lying, that they knew testimony, they admitted it, someone else said that they saw it, then they're chayav a karban olev yorei. Now let's say outside court, he says to them 5 times, do you swear? They say yes. Do you swear? Yes. You're denying it over and over. Of course, bo the Beit Din, you show up in court and all of a sudden their memory was chugged, right? V'hodu. And they say, oh yeah, in fact, we do know testimony, and they testify. He says the Mishnah P'turim. Because remember, you're only chayav b'fnei Beit Din if it's mipi achirim. But if kafru, if they deny in court that they know edut, chayavin al kol achat v'achat, then they'll be chayav for each time that they denied it, okay? Outside court. Sorry, this is the people themselves. But hashpia alehem chamesh pamim b'fnei Beit Din. Let's say the other side said to you in front of court, do you know testimony for me? And they say no. You say, will you swear? And he says yes. He says, will you swear again? Or maybe it happens 5 days in a row or something. But 5 times in front of court, the kafru, says the Mishnah, einan chayavin elachat. They're only chayav once. So the reason only chayav once is that the moment they made that first shvuah, we'll see this in the Gemara, but the moment they made that first shvuah, they were a liar and they're a Russia now. So they're no longer kosher for testimony. So their subsequent shavuot were from someone who's possible for testimony. So they took themselves off the docket, so to speak. Amar Rabbi Shimon, sorry, I read the Mishnah again. Says Rabbi Shimon, Matam, what's the reason for that? Because they couldn't go back and say, we know testimony now. Right? Once you've gone to court and you've denied in front of court, you can't then wake up the next morning and say, you know what? I changed my mind. I woke up. I remembered the testimony. My memory was jogged. I'm going to be a witness. Because either you're making it up when we don't trust you, or you're telling the truth, but yesterday you were lying, in which case you're a liar already. So therefore, you're no longer kashur for testimony. Now, kafru shneim ke'echad, if both witnesses deny that they know testimony together, then shneim chayavin. Then they're both chayav. But if they do it one after the other, then only the Rishon is chayav and Sheni patur. Only the first one is chayav, because once the first one basically took himself off from being a witness, there's only one witness left, and one witness is not enough. So the second one is patur because he wouldn't have made a difference in the din anyways. Kafar echad v'hodeh echad, right? If one of them denies it and the other one admits, meaning he admits to the testimony that he knows, hakofer chayav. Then the one who's kofer is chayav. Again, that seems pretty redundant, and we'll see in the Mishnah what that's referring to. But points out the Mishnah before you get too alarmed by what we just said. Hayu shnei kitei idim, right? Obviously, if you have if you have more than two witnesses, if you have four witnesses, right, two groups of witnesses, then kafra rishona. If the first one denied it, they're chayiv, of course. But if acher kach kafra shniya, they're also chayiv. Shteim chayavot mepnei she'edut yichola letkayim b'shteiam, because you could have had testimony with the other ones, right? Meaning, even if the first two turned out to be liars or not liars or whatever, the second two could have been good witnesses, and when they then deny their testimony, they are basically ruining the case, and therefore they are chayav. I'm trying to think if we should. It's a long Gemara. I think we should stop here actually. So we're going to stop here at the I'm trying to think actually. Yeah, I think we should. The Gemara, it's a complicated Gemara. So we will stop here and pick it up. Tonight is Shevuot. We're not learning tonight, but tomorrow, God willing, an hour before Mincha, so those who can make it in person. And I didn't do anything to James, so I'm going to reach out to James and we'll get the time confirmed.
Chicago, you're flying back from Chicago today?
That's the plan.
Hey, have a safe flight.
I'm giving a talk.
Flight.
It's supposed to be somewhere at 8:00 Chicago time. So, and then flying back at 12. So hopefully I'll be there. Hope to see you, Miriam, tomorrow. And tomorrow afternoon, some daf yomi, and Robert will miss you, but have a Chag Sameach. Good Yom Tov.
I'll find another daf.
I'm sure you'll be able to do that. Okay.
We
Take
need
care,
the
everyone.
Summit Institute to create the Grama Zoom app.
One day we'll get there. Okay, I gotta run. Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov.